Hi, and welcome to another episode, episode 19 of TECHNO CRIME FIGHTERS FORUM. Sorry that we're a little bit late coming on, but we had a little bit of preliminary talk to make this presentation even more exciting for you. The team has decided to talk about hive mind, but there are some other announcements. With us today are the full complements here. We've got Millicent Black, Dr. Millicent Black. We've got Karen Melton Stewart. We've got Dr. Katherine Horton, and of course, Ramola D. So we're going to talk about hive mind. We're going to talk about system judo. And also, Katherine has some pre-announcements about collecting affidavits. So before we go any further, Katherine, would you like to come in and talk about that?
Yes, thank you, Paul, and also thank you to all the listeners. So I guess what I wanted to announce this week is the following: that next week I'm not launching the affidavit collection. That will be shortly after. But what I'm launching is the first draft of the affidavit template, what the team is now working towards is moving to court cases to have a civilized resolution for this rampant crime. And people know my opinion. If we can't get this under control with court cases, the only thing that can actually help us is an all-out military solution, which is not nice. So I'm working flat out for court cases. And what I would like the victims to do is I would like them to start off with some sort of preparation first, because we have to get it right. So what I would like all the victims to do, because if you're a victim and you have been a victim for several years, you will have been assaulted with a plethora of warfare technology and techniques. So most victims will have been assaulted with psychological warfare, for sure. That's the gang stalking, the HUMINTEL, the human intelligence stalking networks. Some people had break-ins. Others had computer hacking, quite prolific computer hacking. And then also financial warfare. So some people had even their credit cards hacked and other stuff. And all this happens at a density and at a rate that's totally unusual. So a total outlier. So you know that you're a victim of the intelligence agencies if you're being assaulted by, a whole host of these attacks, and also at a frequency that's just not normal. And usually there's something really, really odd about it all. You get your house broken into, but nothing of value disappears. Well, that's an indication of an intelligence agency breaking in and not your average burglar. So what I would like all the victims to do, because I want you all to first write up thematically what has happened to you. So we need to collect your evidence. And if you've been assaulted for several years, the task will be so massive that if you're anything like me, you will be daunted, okay? And you will be putting it off because you think that's too much to even get started. So I would like to approach this entire task. I want us to do it together. I'm writing up my evidence, so I know exactly what I'm talking about when I say it's daunting. But what I would like you all to do is approach the task really simply and open a Word document and write down thematically first what has happened to you. So if there have been break-ins into your home, make a section with just break-ins in this Word document and kind of in bullet points list the incidents that you can remember. And you can flash it out later. So make mental notes for yourself. What all the things that happened to you on the break-ins, do you have any evidence for that, and so on. And then move to the next topic. Have you been shot at with electromagnetic weapons? And write down roughly the frequency, what happened to you. Did anything unusual happen to you? Did you end up with bruises? For example, on the topic of bruises, I'm not sure if the camera is good enough to see my hand because it's a bit overlit, but you can see a dot there. And this, a couple of hours ago, I'm not sure if you can actually see it. Maybe if it's shady. Can you see the bruise on my knuckle? It's like there. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, was a shot to my hand. They were trying to hit the knuckle, and they hit exactly between the knuckles. And from the size of the bruise, you can see, I think under the shade, the contrast is better. And you can just see there, that's the size of the beam of a microwave gun. Today I left the house, I went shopping, And before I typed an email, and when I came back after shopping, I typed email again, and I looked down on my hand, and suddenly it had this bruise. Now, this is a typical bruise from a microwave weapon because it was deep blue, something like 1 or 2 hours ago. You know, it was essentially you get hurt and it gets really deep and blue. And then after a couple of hours, it fades. And that's because what has happened is that the capillaries in the upper layer of the skin have been burst by the microwave energy. Okay. Now, what this means is that this is a very shallow bruise, and it clears up fairly quickly because it repairs the little capillaries, and, you know, it drains the blood, and then it disappears. So as horrible as it is, sorry, I didn't want to freak people out, but that is a typical piece of evidence for microwave attacks. Okay. Please photograph these bruises. If you had a lot of these bruises and you didn't photograph them, then just write down that this is the sort of stuff that you observed, roughly the size of the bruise, any sort of features and stuff like that. And I mean, here is evidence that you can be shot at if you're just walking down the street. I was either shot at as I was outside walking down the street, or I was shot at as I was out on my balcony from, you know, a place next door. But at night, for example, I am being shot at nonstop, and I wake up sometimes with massive bruises, and sometimes with an entire series of bruises where I can see that they shot one pulse after the next. And as I was moving, you know, it kind of, the bruise smears. So horrible. But anyway, that is the life of a victim of the intelligence agency. So that all these electromagnetic attacks and symptoms, put it in another section, and then try to think of absolutely everything that happened to you. That's very unusual. So maybe you know when your targeting started. Think, was there any high frequency of, I don't know, things being stolen, your credit cards being hacked, your bank issuing you with a new credit card because the bank says we got hacked, or, you know, did something happen to your friends or your family that was, or your pets that was really, really horrible? And for all these different themes, write a section, please. Okay. So open a Word document, have a different section for all of these, and write it down. And if you know, then write down the date. You can also have a second document where you write everything down chronologically if it helps, but it would really assist me if you had both the chronological order and also the thematic order. You know, because if you're being assaulted, you're probably, you know, one day you get hacked, the next day you're shot at, the third day you've got egregious stalking, and then it repeats. So, you know, chronologically, it will be just hopping from one type of assault to the next. But if you're doing it thematically, then it's much easier for somebody who's looking into your case to just see all the different things that have been done to you. And I'm asking victims to start writing this up. Also, if your computer gets hacked, please turn the Word document into a PDF and email it to yourself, okay? Because then you have a copy on your computer, then you have a copy on the email server, you know, and try to spread it around. If you have a Dropbox, put it also into a Dropbox. And should any of these devices get hacked, and you lose your work, well, then you still have a second computer or second server where this data is stored. And should all three get hacked simultaneously, that's so unusual that you basically have golden evidence, you know, against these intelligence agencies automatically. So whatever they do, you know, you're going to win. So this is the first announcement that I would like to make. So we are moving to collect affidavits, but I want the victims to understand that if you step in front of a judge, the first problem, you have several problems, okay? The judge might be against you. I mean, okay, that's another thing, but we'll get onto that because we'll keep a close eye on these judges, and any judge trying to pull a fast one will probably have his career destroyed through that. So you don't worry about that for now. But the problems you will face, the genuine problems that are inherent to the court system, is first of all time constraints. A judge probably has a pile of other cases, and he has to be able to wrap his head around our cases very, very quickly. Okay, so we all have to find a way whereby we get it into judge's head, what's being done to us, as quickly as possible and as intuitively as possible. So this is why sometimes the chronological order, even though for victims it's very natural because you tell somebody what just happened to you. That's what all of us do. We go through it chronologically because that's how we remember it. Even though that's natural for us, a court wants to assess all the damage that has been done to you. And I've got the gut feeling that thematically it's much better. Also, if you can prove that you had cyber hacking and you had break-ins and you had stalking or something, or your tires got slashed, it's automatically a connection between people who've got cyber hacking skills and people who have got human intelligence, surveillance networks. Now that's linking, in the case of the UK, automatically MI5 and GCHQ, So if we put it like that, the judge can immediately see that what you actually are is the victim of an intelligence agency, of a state-level intelligence apparatus. So this is why I would suggest that we start, ordering it. So the first constraint will be time, and the second constraint, and that's also a genuine constraint inherent in the system, is literally just the IQ of the judge. Okay. Some judges are brilliant, some judges are sub-brilliant, and we have to get it into their heads very quickly why it is just so very, very, very important. And also we have to get it into their heads, even more intimately, why pulling a fast one on victims of the intelligence agencies is a really bad career move. Okay. And we have to make it kind of the best way to get it across to a judge is if you can show absolutely overwhelming pressure. That's how the crime cartel does it. When I went before a judge, they put Mr. Grumpy in the back of the room. So when in England, when you stand up before a judge, you're not allowed to turn your back on the judge. So whilst I'm talking to the judge, I can't turn around and just scan the room. But I noticed that when I left the first two hearings, that there was always somebody in the back who I didn't recognize, and otherwise the court was empty. And I thought, who the hell is this? And in the third hearing, I actually just tested this hypothesis. Is this guy still there? And is he kind of somebody the judge is wary of? By just throwing a fast one at the judge. I happened to mention a case that was kind of a bit iffy for the British establishment, which is the case of this Russian who died in London from radiation poisoning. And I just threw it in, and immediately, as soon as I did, the judge's eyes went straight to this guy at the back. So I immediately knew, okay, he's sitting, first of all, to my left. He's looking straight at the judge. Secondly, the judge assumes he's from British intelligence, or he's somebody who can put pressure on a judge, because as soon as the situation turned iffy, he threw a control glance at this guy, like, what's this, what's the opinion of this guy? How shall I act now? What's the situation? So these things happen, and they will happen to victims. I assume that British or any other intelligence agency will put pressure on the victims. So we have to think about how to counter that. And the way to counter that is pretty much the same way the intelligence agencies do it, with threats. Hey, and the best threats we have is any judge that will not be sticking to the law, the Constitution. Well, that will be noticed, and as the scale of these crimes against humanity become clear, it will also become painfully clear how the judges omitted to help the victims. And I don't think any judge, no matter how high, will be able to survive that. So we have to get it into their heads that these are really crimes against humanity. What we're trying to do is shut down concentration camps, and we're trying to, pull out the 21st century victims of death camp experiments. Okay. And now the question is, how on earth get it across to a judge? And my suggestion is we structure all the things that happen to us thematically, first of all, so that the judge understands immediately, hang on, this person supposedly had his tires slashed, so that's vandalism, had his flat broken into, so that's burglary, but without anything of value being stolen. It seems to be just harassment. Well, that's psychological warfare. Then he seems to complain about, nation state level surveillance and modern electromagnetic weapons. Like, what could the situation possibly be? So that shows the scale. And I want you first to write up what happened to you independently before you see my affidavit draft, because I really want, first of all, in the first round, for you as a victim to think about what has happened to you and write it down without being influenced by anybody else. Okay. So write it down and think about all the different things and try to be as complete as possible. And you have now 1 week, because next week I will just release the affidavit draft. But I want you not to be kind of influenced by what happened to others. And also do not make the mistake of thinking, oh, if I, claim a lot of things that are not really true, then maybe I get more compensation. Because no, you will just shoot yourself in the foot, because the intelligence agencies will fight you. And if it's not the truth, and if you, if you can't prove it, but it's the truth, then don't omit anything, because you can prove it by comparing your situation to others. But if it's not the truth, I wouldn't recommend you writing it down in any way. First of all, because that's misleading. That's basically perverting the course of justice. And second of all, the intelligence agencies do have experts who can spot a lie. And if they spot a lie, they will rip you to shreds. Okay? So the only way to withstand this assault is if you're saying the truth, because then you're standing on granite. There's no way to take your part, because you're saying the truth. And then you should really stare them down, like I will, and just say, well, that's the truth. Do what you like. So here's the strategy. So first of all, everybody, you've got now 1 week. Write down everything in bullet points that happened to you and order it thematically. And also think about how would you order it to get it into the brain of a judge as quickly as possible? Because then the next step will be, I will release my draft, which is the best thing I came up with, which is not necessarily the best thing overall. And then I want you to compare what you've got with what I've got and tell me what I can do better. So what sort of topics am I missing? Or have I done it in a really shit way? If so, please tell me. And then I'll give people 1 or 2 weeks to correct my mistakes, to improve my draft, and then I will release the draft to everybody. And as you're free to do your own thing. I'm not forcing anybody to follow what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that I would like to collect the affidavits so that I can actually understand what's happening at a larger scale, and also to be able to put it across to a judge. So anybody who's willing to share what happened to them to me, please help me improve this affidavit draft so that also you can compare what happened to you with another victim much more easily if you all use the same format. Okay, so that's the homework to all the victims. Everybody who wants to help me, please do that. And please be as independent as you possibly can be when you're writing this. So that's it for me for now.
Thank you very much, Katherine. Any other comments on that particular aspect? Nothing. Okay, everybody's still moody.
Well, that was a remarkable bit of a presentation there, Katherine. Thank you for going so in detail into what is needed. And the only thing I can add really is that that when you write, you don't have to write extensively, but just get the gist of it and write as clearly as possible. But the whole intention is to record, for history, the actuality of what has happened to you. And for too long, people who have been targeted by the intelligence agencies have been given conflicted messages from various people in our midst, some of us have identified as government infiltrators, who are working amongst us deliberately to sabotage and confuse us. And because of that, many of us have received conflicted messages. Some of those messages are, you can do nothing. You can achieve nothing. You can accomplish nothing. The government's too big and too broad and too powerful. You cannot get through to them. You cannot affect what the intelligence agencies are doing. You cannot get your message across to them, and so forth and so on. So what we are here to do is to cut through all of that. Let's think of this as a new day and a new way. And, a new modality of going forward. So, we go forward with absolute optimism, with absolute courage and absolute intention to break this down, to reveal to the world the truth of what is going on. And with that intentionality, write your document and be very clear, because you are recording for history the actuality of the depravity that the intelligence agencies have been effecting on people worldwide. you know, with their horrific weapons and their horrific modalities of hitting people 24/7. That is something that everybody needs to know, in particular physicians, in particular psychiatrists, in particular human rights advocates working for, you know, big human rights organizations as well as small human rights organizations, and in particular journalists. You know, journalists, we know that journalists who belong to mainstream media have their hands tied and their tongues cut out, apparently, by the intelligence agencies because they cannot write the truth. They cannot speak the truth. I don't know what they're doing. They're simply going on and on talking about wiretapping and phone surveillance when this stuff is going on, when electronic surveillance is going on, when neuro surveillance is going on, when directed energy weapons are being used on civilians all around the world, not just in the USA or in the UK or in Europe or in Switzerland, everywhere, pretty much in every UN country, all through a collusion of intelligence agencies. So because of that, because we are living in this void of media information, because journalists have been co-opted, maybe there are one or two journalists here and there, you know, who perhaps are not speaking out because they know the enormity of the situation, because pretty much everyone who speaks out gets targeted themselves, and they do not want to wish this upon themselves. But perhaps that species exists, and we are here to tell that species of journalists, you do need to wake up. You do need to listen to what TIs are saying, and you do need to read these recorded testimonials and listen to the recorded and video recorded testimonials, because this is the reality of our time today, and history will show that you did not act if you do not step forward. So, you know, we are taking the first step of recording. So let's go forward, you know, with absolute faith that what we are doing is a powerful thing, and what we are doing is a very meaningful thing, a significant thing, and it will have effects. You know, it will have those ripple effects that we all want. That's all I wanted to say.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, well, the other...
Just to remind...
Go ahead, Karen.
Just to remind people that even if you think, oh, I can't prove this, there is something called a preponderance of evidence. And that's all you need. Because a judge who looks at the testimony of even 5 people or 10 people, and he says, okay, look at this person was in Oregon, this person was Mexico City, this person was in Brasilia, this other person was in Milan. How is it they're reporting the exact same thing? They don't know each other. So he's going to have to say, this is very odd. It's happening in diverse areas of the world and being reported almost exactly the same way by people who can't possibly know each other. That is a preponderance of evidence. So don't be discouraged. Put whatever it is that is actually happening to you. And I agree, do not elaborate. You know, do not say your pet was poisoned when he was hit with, you know, ran out into the street and got hit with a car. You know, don't elaborate. What is going on is horrific enough. Just put the facts, and people will be horrified by the truth.
That's great. Let's hope they are horrified. Let's hope the judge is horrified. Let's hope we have a judge that's clear thinking and open-minded and not totally corrupted and owned.
Well, you know what, actually, this is because this is the biggest fear, actually. I think we should address that, because the biggest fear of any one litigant is that the judge will be corrupt. You know, you're fighting for your life, and then there's somebody who just jeers at you. Well, I had this feeling, exactly this sort of feeling that I'm being jeered at with the third judge, Judge Holgate. So if I see him again in the High Court, I think I should put it even clearer just how very important this case is also for his own career, actually. And I don't think I put it clearly enough that time. But the good news is that for the one judge who I thought really didn't get it, the gravity of the situation, I had 2 who really got it immediately. And they both look like they were hit by lightning, rightfully so. So Judge Spencer certainly had absolutely, first of all, he never said that I'm mad. He never doubted anything. He just looked at the evidence and he looked at what I said, and I could see, you know, oh my God, written across his face. And he took it very, very seriously, because he understood that this is absolutely essential to have the sort of criminality stopped. And he immediately said, right, the only thing he said is, well, in this case, we need to, I just turned up in court or without notice. And he said, well, in this case, we need to do it with notice. So MI5 and all the others have to be present. But otherwise, he just took it very seriously. And there was absolutely no harassment, nothing. He acted exactly as I expected him to. So that was very, very good. And also the second judge, Judge Edis, he already was being put under a lot of pressure. I could see in his face by this guy who was sitting in the back. And I'll say something about that as well. And there was a moment where he really kept glancing back at this guy. I'm not sure what that guy did, if he was sending hand signs or any sort of threatening glares or anything. But there was one bit where Judge Edis literally turned slightly red, was touching his neck, which is comforting. And then, you know, he said, well, basically the lawyers for the other side wanted this entire case thrown out of court, even before I can submit any evidence. And I had gone into court and I said, I need more time because I had to flee my home because of the attacks. And Judge Edis's reply was, well, but it is, you know, it is just and proper that the court should allow me to present my evidence. You know, this is what the court does. And he gave me a time extension. And I could see in his face that he was put under a lot of pressure, you know, because British intelligence wanted it straight, swept out the room so that I can never actually say what happened to me, you know. And he had to stand up to that pressure, and he did. And that was laudable. And, you know, by the way, in the UK, if you want to bring any charges against the intelligence agencies, you are bounced off to a secret court called the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. And the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, I can use systems analysis to prove that it is a corrupted court to the core. I think 98% of all the cases that are submitted get bounced. Well, that's impossible, right? It means that everybody, 98% of the people fighting to get to the court just come with rubbish. I don't think so. No one tries to sue the intelligence agencies with just piffling nonsense. So the court's corrupted, and also the number of cases that they're supposedly deal with has no resemblance to the number of cases you expect using, you know, the laws of system physics. So that court is corrupted. However, I think I did point out that the court was corrupted, and actually Judge Edis was massively concerned. And the first thing that shocked him is that there's no way to appeal the judgment by the secret court. He was astounded to hear that. And, you know, but one of the things that I know is that since then, Judge Edis has been appointed to be a judge on the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. And so any victim that applies to the IPT and finds himself or herself before Judge Edis can expect that this guy already knows what they are talking about, because I put it to him rather clearly. So that's already good as well, you know. And then on the last thing that I would like to say, also to all the judges who are, you know, perhaps listening. Sorry, I think, Karen, I think your microphone stayed on, because on my end, I'm just being truncated. I'm not sure. Can people hear me? Because, Karen, can you just switch off your microphone?
We can hear you, Katherine.
Okay, because I'm just keep getting feedback, and I think sometimes the audio gets truncated. Anyway, so then I want to say to all the judges who maybe are listening and who maybe find themselves in the situation of having to adjudicate in such a case and find Mr. Grumpy sitting in the back, glaring at them threateningly, I would like to point out to them that they should have a good think of who Mr. Grumpy could possibly be. Because the assumption is always, oh, he's the guy sent from MI5, or oh, he's the guy sent from CIA. And what also the judges have to remember is that when you're dealing with the intelligence agencies, you're dealing with professional con men, with professional con artists. So whoever Mr. Grumpy who's sitting in the back, he's most likely a con artist. And I had to think about who that could be. And one of the things that I thought was extremely striking about that guy is that he looked just so ill-tempered. He just looked so threateningly nasty. And, you know, over the years, I had my share of brushes with real agents, and some of them were, I think, also real assassins. And none of them looked actually quite so unhappy as this guy. So I don't think this guy was actually anything that mean. I think my best guess is that he must have been the receptionist at MI5, because everybody knows that the receptionist in any organization is the meanest person around and the most grumpy looking. Those are the kind of people that, you know, when you come in the morning, it spoils your day forever. So I think my best guess is that they sent, you know, the receptionist. I don't know how they did it. They must have said, you know, Sanel, can you just pop over to court 37 and just sit there? He's like, what for? Oh, nothing. Just go there and carefully count every single time the judge says the word "and." It's important for national security. So you have this guy sitting in the back frowning as he's trying to keep track how many times, you know, the judge said "and." The judge thinks, oh my God, you know, I'm going to be shot if I leave the courtroom. No, it's going to be a con, people. Okay, it's going to be a con, because at the end of the day, any judge that comes to harm after a high-profile case, well, the finger is going to point straight back at Andrew Parker, head of MI5, where the fingers are already pointed at Andrew Parker, head of MI5. So, you know, it's not going to happen. So what we're all working towards is really a civilized solution. And the last thing that we should do is be somehow cowed by, you know, the nonsense arsenal of these professional shysters, you know, quite frankly. And I also think that every single time they pull a trick like that, like putting Mr. Grumpy into the back of a court, we should really bang on about it, and we should catalog it, and we should diffuse it, you know, so that bit by bit we deplete their, what I call their shyster arsenal of, you know, fast tricks to pull on us, because 98% of what they do is a con. So that's what I've got to say about court cases.
Can I say something about the courts in the United States? My experience in federal court, I never saw the judge. My case, I make sure that that proved my case have been what helped me to stay in court for almost a year. Even the dismissal came as letter in the mail. So for most of us, see a judge, that we have all of our evidence, that we are able to, following the rules of the court concerning filing our cases.
Okay, Millicent, could you repeat that, because you were breaking up quite heavily? Just repeat what you said, because I got some of it, but not all of it.
What could sound better at all?
Your sound is bad today. He's really in your computer, however he operates this. It's frustrating.
But actually, one of the things, now that we're on this topic, one of the things that I want people to do, right? If you get as annoyed by this, but what Millicent is suffering from is hacking by this Air Force perpetrator. Okay, so he's a psychopath, and as far as I can tell, a serial killer, and he's been harassing her for absolute ages. And every single time she's got something important to say, she's being hacked. Now, what I would like to have is I would like to hire a computer specialist to literally go and have a look at Millicent's computer, and if necessary, sit next to her as we're broadcasting and make sure that this absolute nonsense doesn't fly, or else there's an expert witness, okay, that can testify that this is really high-level hacking. However, these computer specialists, they, I think, come at least at $500 a pop. And if people could please reach into their pockets now. Millicent has got a GoFundMe page, and please donate. You can get to Millicent's page if you go to, I'll show you how to get there quickest. We can put the link in, but meanwhile, I'm share my screen, and you go to stop007.org whilst you're still pissed off. You scroll down to support our fighters. This is here with the red boxing gloves. And then you go down to Millicent's site here, and there's already the GoFundMe button, okay? If you don't know Millicent yet, here's her story, or the introduction, and then you can actually submit money to a legal fund or the medical fund, you know, either way. Somehow get the money to her, like now, so that we can get this nonsense sorted, because the truth is that she can't do it. She can't fight a cyber hacker on her own whilst being tortured Yes, so we can't leave the Auschwitz victims to fight on all fronts. So the computing side, somebody else has to fight, and I want that to be a professional, okay? But we have to be able to pay the professionals. So please donate, like now, okay? And please also write to the FBI and ask why the F this guy is still not arrested. So Millicent, you were saying, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to adjust my sound volume. Does that sound better at all?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Good, good. Then I'll get out of this. Because that's what I wanted to say was in the federal court in my case for everything
when we hear you, we hear you well, but it's so choppy. It's so choppy.
Later.
Maybe Millicent can write it down.
Actually, yes, that's a really good idea. Millicent, can you just type it into the chat and we'll read it out? Because what this guy is doing, I can tell exactly, because when you just told, we could hear you fine.
Okay, Millicent, go to the top left-hand corner. Move your cursor up to the top left-hand corner, and you'll see a square box with white lines. If you push that, then the group chat, our group chat, this isn't the chat that's coming in from outside. See if you can find that, and type it in and we'll read it. Can you see?
What's so typical is that we could hear her perfectly clearly when she said, you know, I'm adjusting the volume. And then when she started talking, it was interrupted. And what you basically saw is a live demonstration of a childish, absolutely demented, deranged psychopath. And he literally plays like a 5-year-old. And when we have our team meetings, Millicent is usually harassed like that. And last time we met, we spoke for about 2.5 hours. And the first hour, she was interrupted just like that. And the second hour, we could hear her fine. You know, so that is, again, evidence, and I'm cataloging of this guy who needs to be urgently arrested at last by the FBI, who have been told by Karen and me and by Millicent 1,000 times. No.
And we have a very long article on my site detailing exactly what has happened with Millicent. And any police official, any FBI official can go to my website and read the whole story, because it details chronologically what exactly has been done to Millicent. You know, she's a victim of the US Air Force, and she's a victim of the CIA.
Great. Well,
does that show up?
Yes, it does, actually. I can just read it. So you're saying that, so Millicent is saying, my experience in the federal system is that you may never get to see the judge before your case is dismissed. My case was kept in the court for at the year. I presented all of my exhibits at the beginning, which may be why I was able to keep my case in court. However, I never saw a judge. You know what, Millicent? I think that's shocking. That's shocking. I think what they did is they kind of kept you at arm's length. Because you have to step before a judge, because the judge has to see your face and actually judge a case. He has to see the victim. And I think what this shows is this is corruption in the federal court system. This is not how it's meant to be. No case should ever be dismissed without the judge seeing the victim. That's just not how it is. So actually what we need is the name of the judge, whoever dismissed the case. Really. I think he should be reminded at the end of his career that he dismissed the case, really. Because now we need the names. We're going after the people. We're going after individuals, guys. We're going after the people who actually pulled the levers. And the individuals we're going after in Millicent's case is, I think, this judge, because something is not right about this. And my team has seen the exhibits that Millicent has, and she has top evidence. Okay, absolutely top evidence. So how can it be so that some absolutely totally piffling, waste of time case gets washed all the way to the Supreme Court, and Millicent's case isn't? Okay. He says, not in the US, each federal court is different. State courts have a hearing with the plaintiff and the defendant, but not in the federal court. Oh my, I didn't know that. Well, that's interesting. Maybe the federal court system needs to be changed, because that's just ludicrous. Yeah, we need to look into that. And we need to find a way, because there must be. Maybe there's a petition system. Can one petition somebody? But actually, also to all of you guys out there listening, this is your chance to get on the case, okay? So somebody please start Googling and try to think of what Millicent can do. And is this how the system is meant to run? And is it a good idea if it runs like that? Are there any ancient laws that we can dig out that, from a time when the courts were still functional? Because this is BS. This is just total BS. No, what she's saying is right. That's the truth. That's how it is. But it's nonsense that it runs like that.
Yeah, I think, Katherine, this may be where we may have to look into organic laws of the United States of America. What were the original organic documents that, established the founding of this country and helped this country run as a lawful nation? Because something has happened to the court system. The court system has been taken over, and they're being run as corporations, right? Just as the U.S., as we understand, is a corporation. We're talking about U.S. Inc. There is the U.S. Inc., and then there's the landmass of the United States of America, which continues to stand, obviously. So and those organic laws that we're talking to refer to that landmass and refer to the actual inhabitants of that landmass. But we also have this overlay, the corporation, with its corporate statutes and laws and codes, which are being used against us. So perhaps it's time to go back to those organic laws and find out how exactly we can bring these people to justice. Right?
Very good point. Absolutely, totally super point, actually. So for the people who don't know yet and who are following, if you don't believe that everything around us has been turned into corporation, please go. I think there's an international global company registry where every company has a registry number, and you will find your local police station there. You will find everything, your hospital, everything that you think is a public institution. Most likely you'll find it registered as a company. Now, what this nonsense is a group of psychopaths thinking that if they just make a website, a big database, and they just keep putting stuff in, then it kind of belongs to them. Well, that's nonsense. They have subverted stuff, and what they do is that they make this website, this database, and they present it as facts, and then they kind of, present you with what they think is fait accompli, which is, it's like, that's it, it's done. It's all corporations now. And well, this is not how the world works. Thankfully, this works as long as people don't know what has been pulled, and what has been pulled is this nonsense. And also, by the way, there are active steps everywhere. I know of cases in the UK where structures that are not companies, for example, they had things like multi-generational housing projects, community housing, where people were sharing living space with disabled people and actually living kind of in symbiosis and perfect harmony. And that these sort of housing projects are maliciously being broken up by a group of psychopaths who want to turn that into a business model. They want money, and they see a group of people that they don't make money from yet, and they want to make money from them by turning everything into a company. That's what this is. I think everybody who's listening should go and check if their local institutions are perhaps in this company registry. And if they are, now is the time to kick off a big stink, literally.
And in fact, people like the intelligence agencies, they're also incorporated, right? So every single intelligence agency is actually a corporation. I wonder what that says about the military. Is the Department of Defense also a corporation?
Well, the BLM and the Department of Homeland Security are private corporations. They're for-profit corporations.
Yeah, so this is
what else is
inexplicable, isn't it? It's like, so it's not really pure government working for us. It's the government of a corporation.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fascism, isn't it? You know, when you have corporations that basically infiltrate government and force government to work for them, that's fascism.
Correct. And therefore, the police that you think are working for the people are really not working for us. They're working for the corporation. And this is why they are targeting us and assaulting us. If you look into what the police has been doing, if you look just in the United States alone, it's bad enough. You know, it's like 400 to 500 people killed by police officers every single year. And we're talking about SWAT teams, we're talking about police barging into families' homes all across the country and killing children, handcuffing children, killing the family dog, killing the father in front of the children, that kind of thing. It's like absolutely out of control, insane aggression and violence.
Exactly.
And then,
sorry, Karen.
Just to say, and for the most part, they investigate themselves and find they did nothing wrong.
Exactly. Yes. And that's what's reported in the news. Oh, yes. And in fact, let's move on to Blue Lives Matter now, because you see, we have to take care of our police in their blue uniforms who are going around killing people instead of, you know, scrutinizing what the police are doing and holding them accountable.
Exactly. And I think, you know what, we will start. I've just seen Millicent has sent another message. And I think the way to get the police is, and that's how I'm going to get my police, is by dereliction of duty. Because when you mention things like people being attacked with a novel type of weapon and the police officer is utterly disinterested, that's dereliction of duty. It's his duty to be up to speed. It's not up to single moms to SWAT up on military tech and then educate the police. It's the, you know, the police should go first in these matters. But Millicent actually is very important. She says, so she was saying how, you know, each... So actually, only now did I get the full meaning of her message, because her previous message was that each US, not in the US, each federal court is different. The state courts have a hearing with the plaintiff and the defendant, but not in the federal court. And then she said, even with Supreme Court decisions in my complaint, they were ignored. Bombshell. It is supposed to be standard that the decisions of the Supreme Court cannot be overturned in the federal or state court, but in my case, they were not even considered, and they were properly cited. That's right. That's actually, this is bombshell. With this, we're gonna crack a couple of federal judges' careers open, literally, because this is bombshell. So we will go back. This is, I mean, this is contributing absolutely everything.
Let's look at the Supremacy Clause of the United States. And I'm going to read this. The Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution, Article 6, Clause 2, establishes that the Constitution, federal laws made pursuant to it, and treaties made under its authority constitute the supreme law of the land. It provides that state courts are bound by the supreme law. In case of conflict between federal and state law, the federal law must be applied. Even state constitutions are subordinate to federal law. In essence, it is a conflict of laws rule specifying that certain national acts take priority over any state acts that conflict with national law. In this respect, the Supremacy Clause follows the Article 8 of the Articles of Confederation, which provide that every state shall abide by the determination of the United States Congress assembled on all questions which by this confederation are assembled by them. A constitutional provision announcing the supremacy of federal law, the Supremacy Clause assumes the underlying priority of federal authority, at least when the authority is expressed in the Constitution itself. No matter what the states or the federal government might wish to do, they have to stay within the boundaries of the Constitution. This makes the Supremacy Clause the cornerstone of the whole American political structure.
Exactly, exactly. And you know what, everybody now, listen to this carefully. And what we're going to do is we also announced that we're going to talk about system judo here. And judo is a martial art form whereby you use pretty much the weight and the you know, weight usually is power in wrestling and that sort of stuff. But if you use the laws of physics correctly, then weight becomes inertia. So you use the inertia of your opponent to bring him down. You use the force of your opponent to bring him down. Now, in this case, I would recommend that we just turn it on themselves with the move of system judo, and we just state the problem as follows. We state that this criminal cartel that we've identified in previous episodes, the international crime syndicate, has infested the judiciary, and there are judges on the bench who are not judges, they are frauds, and they are criminals. And now the question is, how do we find them? Now, the criminal judge will be revealing his true persona by acting criminally and corruptly. And ignoring Supreme Court judgments and ignoring the Constitution is what a corrupt judge would do. So as soon as we find somebody like that, we don't freak out. We go, aha, we found an agent of the crime cartel who has to be removed or has to be jailed. And then we move to the next step and we try to dig out the mechanisms by which one can jail a judge for corruption. So the people who don't believe me that judges can be horrifically corrupt, may I just share my screen and point you to the case of the journalist, Janet Phelan, or Fallon, I'm not sure how to pronounce her surname. But there's an interview with her. She is now in exile because she has been attacked so brutally. I think she's now somewhere in Latin America. But here's an interview with Sean Stone and on RT. And this is the series Watching the Hawks. And I encourage absolutely everybody to watch this interview with Janet because she's an investigative journalist and she has been uncovering corrupt judges, how judges are taking bribes. And I am going to stick the link into the chat right now, and it will be in the, God, where's the chat? It will be, maybe I can't post it. I think I can't, sorry, I can't post any links. I'll post it to, post it on our link and we can talk about it. But what she has discovered, and she was very, very clever, she said you can spot a corrupt judge by the bribes he takes. And then she looked at the financial affairs of judges, and then she found out that judges were taking on massive mortgages. And she said, you know, a judge has got a certain income, which is I don't know how many, thousand per year. And then you would find a judge.
Probably about 160,000.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. So order of magnitude, think 160,000. And then this judge would take on a mortgage 1 year for about 2 million and pay it back a year later or 2 years later. And then he would take out another mortgage for another, multi-million property. How on earth did he pay it back? Well, it got paid back through the bribes he took. Simple as. And she was going through and she said that there were, defendants being thrown, or cases being thrown out of court by corrupt judges. And then when this issue of the judges' mortgages was raised, the judge very quickly, let off. So this is a reality, people. And what we're seeing here, this is not a mistake. It's even more than just the odd judge being corrupt. What we're seeing is a program that was years in the making. You remember maybe last episode where I kind of put it to you that the Freemasons had a multi-century program, as I'm saying, I'm suspecting, to take down the royal households and to take down entire nations. Well, they've been at it for a very long time. They are a front for the mafia, and the mafia has, I would say, put corrupt judges specifically into positions because they can be blackmailed. Okay? So this is not by mistake. What we expect to find is not just corrupt judges. We expect to find even more corrupt judges than one would expect using just minimum bias statistics. Okay, a lot. And I think Millicent just happened to chance on one. So maybe we just have a look at his mortgages, perhaps, of that guy who was ignoring Supreme Court judgments. Maybe he's got links to pedophile rings, any such things, also.
Millicent's left another note there about the state judge. And I think we covered that a little bit in my article. It's about how the judge didn't look at her case, and he was handpicked by the former lawyer of Barrett Wolf.
Oh my God.
Well, let me read the 14th Amendment at a certain time to remind people. If you have time, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or the immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So that was trampled in Millicent's case.
And here, this is what Millicent said. You know, Millicent, may I just read it out? Because this is just so powerful. It's just, she said, the state judge did not even look at my case close enough to consider the Supreme Court sightings. He was handpicked by the former lawyer of Barrett Wolf, who's now a judge. Now, for all those who don't know, Barrett Wolf is the kind of code name for this guy who is a, you know, psychopath, you know, Air Force guy, who is, I would say, a serial killer. So he has, imagine, he has got a lawyer, and then this lawyer becomes the judge. You know, what coincidence. And then that judge even allowed the lawyer for the defendant to speak for me, so to speak for Millicent, and refused to allow me to amend my case, which was illegal. It was illegal. The judge then said, now let this be the end of it. I've got news for you. It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning, my friend. We're coming after you, and it will be a pleasure. It will be my personal pleasure. And then she says, even the federal court told me that nobody wants to deal with Maury County courts because they make their own rules. Wow.
God.
Wow. Well, you know what? We've got the names now. The judge's name is on the judgment, so there's no escape. There's literally resistance is futile at this point. And I think what these people still haven't understood is, you know what? I think I get that a lot, actually. I get that a lot from Swiss intelligence as well, you know, who kind of, I mean, they've shut me up at night and, you know, they shoot me in the hand when I go outside. And I think they look at us and they just think, oh, yeah, you know, just 5 little women. I mean, you know, what's the deal? We can finish them off. And the one thing that they don't understand is how the system moves. Okay, because what we're now is the system is changing, and it will be changing ever more rapidly. I can already tell that. And what we have behind us are massive troops, actually, that get bigger and bigger by the day, non-linearly. So I think if I want to pick a medieval analogy, it's like you've got, you know, one army somewhere in the field, and then you see 4 little women on little ponies right down the hillside. And then, you know, your archers try to shoot them up, and, you know, all of your guys are making fun of them. And they're like, you know, look how pathetic. These are the women of the other side. And, you know, guys are having their fun and, you know, being like sexually denigrating and all that. And whilst they're having their fun and concentrating on the women, the one thing they don't see is the armies slowly being visible on the crest of the hill. And those people are watching carefully what you're doing with the vulnerable. And based on what you do with them, they will decide what they'll do with you. It's like that, basically. So this judge had his chance. There was Millicent in court who was begging for help. And what did this guy do? He behaved in the most corrupt and, you know, for Millicent, most humiliating way possible. And with that, he pretty much told us how we should deal with him. And now we're coming after him. So I don't think his career will survive. And we should start with looking at his mortgages or other sort of monetary flows that might, you know, show up in fancy cars or fancy holidays and that sort of, you know, and then we can expand it out towards maybe pedophile rings. I think that's the way to go. So investigators, look at this case, track it down. We'll, you know, post the actual. Millicent, do you have the actual name of your case? So if people search it in the federal court registry? Because yes, I think we should start going after these people. And what I mean with system judo is that so far every act of corruption was used as a weapon against us. When you use system judo and you say we're looking for corrupt judges, every act of corruption is incriminating them, and they are generating evidence against them. And by the way, the same thing is also true of the police. You know, the police ignoring people who are attacked with microwave weapons. Well, that's harmful to the victims. But when you say, as I'm now doing, I'm looking for all evidence of police corruption, please collect all evidence of police corruption, what they've done is they just incriminated themselves, you know. So please do keep approaching the police and try to make them generate evidence that they are ignoring you. Oh, hang on. She wrote, they don't make recordings, so there's oh wow, there's no record of what is said unless you take a court reporter. Holy cow, I didn't know. This was my case against the Mount Pleasant Police Department, Black versus Mount Pleasant Police Department. Chief Tommy Goetz, Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor, Lieutenant Charles Crosslin, Corporal Amy Dean, and other unnamed officers, 2014. Okay, so all the lawyers and people who've got access to legal registries, please look for, okay, where's it again? Sorry, that is, yes, so you look for the case Black versus Mount Pleasant Police Department and others, I would say, in 2014. So we have to dig out absolutely everything. Millicent, do you know the name of the judge who adjudicated that case? Oh wow! She says in the state court it was the same thing. Only it was heard in my home, also in Millicent's home county, where the Old Boys Network was at play. Okay, so she's looking up the names. Okay, so everybody who has this Old Boys Network effect, please don't despair. Please use system judo and say, you start off with, there is an Old Boys Network who's acting corruptly. And then you try to find the names, and they will reveal themselves because, you know, these corrupt guys will be popping up left, right, and center around you. And then identify the names, and then, you know, you already assume that there's a network. So what they do is that they reveal their network. If you approach the problem like that, they are generating evidence on themselves. So any sort of irregularity is an indication of some sort of network at play. And please write down the names because they will be important in court. So Millicent is now looking up the case for the judge. And then another thing, another aspect of system judo I want to mention is also that the way we're going to play this war and the way we are already, you know, playing it is we're using volleyball. So in volleyball, you know, the ball never stays with one person. So it's not like football where one person is just, you know, running with the ball paths across the field, but it gets bounced between people. And that's exactly how we're going to do it, because what they're trying to do is surround people and literally destroy them. But they can only do that if the ball stays with one person. If it gets bounced out into a totally different corner of the court, then they are chasing after the ball, you know. So the way we're going to do it is now what Millicent is doing is she bouncing the ball across to Europe. I'll have a look at it and I'll bounce it to other people who will then bounce it on. And very quickly, you know, a lot of people are looking into it. So she said, the federal court judge, John Bryant, referring Judge William Haynes, presiding. Okay, we should post this because maybe I mispronounced the name. So let me just copy this into the chat. Actually, I can't. Mindy, could you copy the names into the chat, the live chat? Because I think this entire text should be in the live chat, frankly.
Okay, we'll try to do that. She got up for a minute, but she'll be right back in. We'll try to copy this whole thing into the live chat if we can do that. Okay. So
actually, just before, because you know what, Paul, you had something really, really important to talk about today, because you also announced that we're going to talk about the hive minds, you know. And we should certainly talk about the hive minds. And I think, so the first time I heard about hive minding, it really terrified me, because it's something very, very kind of, threatening. Very briefly, before we get onto the hive minding, I just would like to say one more thing, because the hive minding is an example of the ultimate in neuro warfare, I would say. So what the victims have to deal with is, psychological warfare, electromagnetic warfare, and now comes the neuro warfare. And then, a lot of them who are implanted also have this sort of bio-implant warfare, where you're literally being crippled remotely. And each stage you have to kind of have some sort of weapon arsenal with which you can fight back. And I think the neuro warfare is probably the hardest one. So before we get into the topic, may I just very briefly kind of do a practice run? Because with all the other types of warfare that we are faced with, there are people who have been in the fight for a long time already. And I would like to point at what they have been doing, kind of what they are trying to do to fight back. So before we get into neuro warfare, let's just think back of all the different types of warfare that are being used against the population right now. So of course we know about directed energy weapons, and what can you do? Well, you can block it with metal. You can try to put metal in front of you. With the psychological warfare, that's the gang stalking, the messaging. Ramola has excellent examples, of all the different types of psychological warfare, the color coding and so on. And, I also want to mention the messages on the vans, right? You got them quite a lot, Ramola, right?
Yes, they do all sorts of covert communications with license plates, and then they bring, vans with the messages on the side right across your field of view as you're driving, because we're all on an AI network at this point, and, they probably have GPS trackers in all our cars, so they know when you're stepping out, and they know where you're going, because you may have spoken to somebody about it, or they know your patterns, and they know your regular routines, so they know where you're going, they know which route you're taking. So we're all on this AI network. These routes are mapped on AI networks now, and so AI is coordinating and orchestrating the movement of other vehicles across your field of view. So yes, they do engage, and many of us have reported this. So at this point, trying to pull together patterns from very many different sources, it's sort of indisputable that this is going on, that this kind of ridiculous covert communication is going on. We're color coding a lot of people in red or a lot of people in orange, suddenly crossing your path, and apparently red means danger, stop what you're doing, and orange means we are military intelligence, we're watching you, and or yellow, which is we're the police, and then a lot of other people, the so-called gang stalkers, which is really infrared, the regular populace being cordoned into this, people walking with their hands held behind their back, held together as if they're being handcuffed. That's a little message. Handcuffs are coming your way. And then the other day I went to Home Depot to pick up a couple plants with my daughter, and a guy steps out of a van just in front of me. He's wearing an ankle bracelet. So, little messages while a black helicopter flies overhead across the parking lot. And while I'm sitting in the yard, black helicopters are flying overhead. So what am I supposed to think? Perhaps I'm supposed to think nothing. And in fact, I look at it and go, interesting. And, maybe I should capture that. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, because I'm so bad with my video camera. But yes, all of this stuff is constantly being sent our way, sent into our field of view. We're getting all sorts of covert messages. And, you can choose or choose not to interpret them. But they are definitely being flooded across our fields of view. Many different kinds.
Absolutely. And I think what you did is absolutely fantastic, because you also incorporated all the different counter mechanisms, because this ties in with what Paul is going to say about the hive mind tools. By the way, before I forget, I've just seen Millicent posted the name of the judge in the state case in Maury County, and that was heard by Judge David Allen. Okay, so everybody have a good close look at Judge David Allen of Maury County. Maury County being, a hotbed of corruption and old boys. Maybe people want to look into what sort of boys, David Judge Allen might be hanging out with, perhaps, and how closely. All this stuff. Okay, we're going to get on their cases. But so that we will not forget. And then the other thing is, so talking about this, because this is psychological warfare, and it ties in with the hive minding actually, because I think what they're doing is that they're trying to send stuff your way and then measure your brain response. You've got, I already measured the chips on my head, so I certainly have them, and so on. And but now the question is, but we'll talk about the hive minding more, but already at this stage, how can you, because what it will do is it will give you the feeling of continually being ganged up on, because you are, it's kind of mob action. And mob action is used to break you down psychologically. And the question is, how can you do system judo on this sort of stuff? And one of the things is, I call it, what they actually do is that they use innocent incidents during a day, and they reprogram them with meaning. It's almost like a form of cultural appropriation. There shouldn't be anything strange about, say, some delivery van driving past you. But when they keep sending messages, after a while you learn, and you're meant to learn, that it somehow applies to you. But then what can you do? Well, you can recognize that this is programming and reprogram it yourself. You can condition yourself to trigger something else and trigger the total opposite of what they want to trigger. So for example, with the color coding, if they, I don't know, I think I've heard from the historian Sean Ross that blue means war. For example, that's why you've got the blue helmets, right, in war zones. Now, if blue means war, you can either stay with the meaning war, or you can reprogram it, or you say, damn straight, we're in a war and I'm fighting you. And every single time you see blue, you're like, oh, yes, I meant to be fighting you, of course. I thought I'm just doing my groceries, but no, I'm actually fighting you. And, all this other stuff, yellow for the police. Yellow, that's usually the color for urine. And it could mean that they are piss poor at their job, and then you can see yet another guy who's piss poor with his job, and they're just advertising, And things like ankle bracelets, well, that's what they're going to wear in jail, and so on, and throw it back at them. For example, just today, this is, fresh off the press, when I went shopping and when I was shot in the hand, there was a van that pulled over in front of me, kind of they overtake you, and they pulled in front of the supermarket car park, blocking the pavement and staying there for long enough so that I, as I'm walking towards, I really see it. And this time it was Europe car saying, yes, it said Europe car moving your way, and your was highlighted, as in we're coming your way. I think that's what's meant to say, we're really coming your way. And then, but the way I already, because I've been doing this reprogramming for ages, the way I read it is, oh, now it's moving your way, as in, yes, the system is moving your way. And I literally, the first thought I had in my mind was, of course it's moving my way, idiots. Because I understand the system, it's going to move the way I say, because I know how this thing is working. So anyway, they can do all this stuff. And what really helps is if you get massively arrogant towards them, so anything, arrogance usually is not a good thing. But in this case, it really is. And that's exactly what they're training their perpetrators to do. That's why they usually have like their chin raised, grinning at you sarcastically. It's meant to put them into an empowered position, empowered body language. And you have to do the same thing,
Catherine, let's let that have mine.
Say it again.
Who's talking?
I think Millicent said something about hive minds.
Millicent, well, she has to type, unfortunately, to get past her. Here we go. Do you want to read it, Catherine? Did you get?
Oh, here it is. Oh, yes. Yes, she said, get onto the hive minds. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is super important, actually.
Well, I was listening to Eric Karlstrom's interview, and it was on, I can never remember, Scotland or Ireland, or Ramola knows the name of the. Was it
the Kevin Baker show?
Kevin Baker show. Yeah. Okay. And I thought it was totally amazing because first of all, it talked about the scope of the program, which is much bigger than we I'd ever even imagined. And I know how huge MK Ultra is. This is an enormous, enormous international program. And
Wow.
I listened to that interview, and then I listened to the first half of the actual interview with Brian too. And I don't know, you know, I'm very much of a right brain person. So when I listen to something, my mind goes in 100 different directions, and it builds little scenarios and ideas on. So if I were to explain this right now, I'd probably have, 50% Brian 2's ideas and 50% Paul Marco's ideas that are totally, unproven. It seems to me that he's talking about a program to create a hive mind in all the particular victims. And the particular victims are chosen for several reasons. Actually, what I can do is I can pull up, I've got Eric's original interview keyed up, and I've cut off the Kev Baker stuff, so it just starts with him telling about the system and the program. And from what I know about the brain, I think there are ways around this program. And let's just, I'll probably want to talk to Eric about it. But let's listen to, let me see if I can screen share and then put up. Okay, I have my technical expert here trying to, here we go.
Well, let's see, is this showing?
Can you see the, what can you see now?
Here we go.
Here we go.
This one. Share.
Not much to see.
Okay, there you go. Present to everyone up here.
Okay, here we go. What's going on?
So you really need to show it.
Interesting. Should I pull it up again? Not that interesting so far. Well, I could get that up. I can give you a synopsis of what I heard, which may or may not be exactly what he said. It's an enormous program, and they're interested in people for several reasons. When you get put into this program, you're assigned to a team of people, and the head of that team is generally a psychologist, psychiatrist, and they're working in the public or private sector along with this job of monitoring these particular individuals, these targets. And the leader of the team will be called the clone, because he or she is getting so familiar with your brain patterns that it can almost replicate them in their own head. So what they're doing is they're watching your brain. The computer, which he says is way beyond AI, it's consciousness computer, he calls it, charts your brain, and it duplicates the algorithms in your brain that gives you your decisions. So after they've watched you for a few years and have watched you make these decisions, they can make them in advance of your making them. That's why they can go out and set up a street theater. What you're going to do. They know your algorithm. They know how you think. And what the idea of the street theater is to give them more data, aggravate you. They want to put you in fear or piss you off so that you react. The reaction is data for their algorithm. So no matter how you react logically, they learn something. If you react illogically, it's no use to them. And if you can train yourself, this is my thinking on, because the way around this program is to do several things at once, like dance and listen to music. Get out of your left brain, which is the algorithm. Get into something. That's why I've heard from Millicent many times and other TIs, if you let them interfere with your life, they're winning. They are. It's a matter of focusing on things that aren't fear-based. I can remember when we were doing some interviews with people on Jade Helm. And the idea of Jade Helm is an AI in the battlefield that works as the general. When the troops move forward, the enemy reacts. The AI learns from how the enemy reacts and recalibrates what they're going to do next. In other words, they don't need a general. What they need is this AI who's studying the battlefield. That's the whole idea of Jade Helm, was to gather information. But they can only gather information on fear and anger reactions. They can only go into your left brain that's an algorithm-based brain, because the thing that's monitoring you is algorithm-based. So what Brian 2 is saying, I think, if I'm catching on to what they're talking about, is that if you do something illogical, in other words, you're going to take your child to school, you don't drive that same way, you stop at 7-Eleven, or you don't take her to school at all, you turn around and come back. If you do things that they're not expecting, it's not in your algorithm of copy of your algorithm in their system. And in the head of your clone, who's also so much into your head. And apparently there are teams of 4 or 5 people that work shifts to handle you day by day and keep giving you challenges to watch you react to them. They give you street theater. They give you, I don't know, days in court. They give you everything. They shoot you with energy weapons. How are they going to respond to that? And their response is what they're interested in. So that's what I got out of it. And with my inability to play my screen share,
Paul, do you want us to play?
Yeah, can you? I'll tell you where I started in.
Yeah, tell me where it is, and I'll queue up mine. Actually, let me share my screen because I've got the. No, let me set it up, and then I'll share my screen. What was the time signal that I should play?
We're getting it. It's 11. Started 11 minutes in, because the beginning is a lot about Anthony Patch and the Kev Baker show and all that.
Okay. All right. So let me share.
Start at 11 and play for a little bit, and then we can talk. I hope that this is what I wanted. The cool thing about this is it's a way out. It's a It's a way to frustrate their program.
Okay, here we go.
I think.
Stalking history, because this is all coming out of this mind control history. So the first premise here of what I call the 2 scenario is that modern gang stalking is a global system of neuro warfare, cognitive warfare. It is the modern continuation of the CIA's MKUltra/Monarch trauma-based mind control program. While there were hundreds of programs in the CIA's MKUltra program back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which were exposed in the 1970s church Senate hearings. Today there are many, many more programs and projects. And then I link to this article of mind control history and applications. Second premise, and this is from Brian 2's lecture, the 4 primary agencies carrying out global gang stalking mind control operations are the CIA and DIA, DIA's Defense Intelligence Agency, which hire the neuroscience hive mind teams as subcontractors. The Department of Defense, which supplies the money through their black budget projects, and the NSA, which provides the top scientists. Hive mind teams, according to two, and he's got a number of good YouTubes on this, communicate via synthetic telepathy. So, you know, we're getting into real high-tech stuff. The government's probably 60 or 80 years ahead of the rest of the population technologically in so many ways. And, of course, that allows these things to go on. People really can't imagine what's going on because they have no knowledge of it. Third one is a large pool of people are needed as targeted individuals and mind control victims for this kind of research. Therefore, Brian 2 suggests there are tens of millions of targeted individuals in America and tens of millions more around the world. According to 2, and of course I've been trying to estimate these numbers for a long time, and I'd come up with millions, but he says tens of millions. Individuals are placed into this program because they fall into one of 4 categories, according to 2. Judicial targets, criminals. 2, extrajudicial targets. This would include all kinds of people, activists, whistleblowers, dissidents, etc. Targets of opportunity, and this could be just about anybody, certainly including MK Ultra victims who have been a test subject for the CIA, you know, going back to the early years of their lives. And lucrative targets, or people that are, for some reason, involved with something that is profitable, and or maybe they've got some very rich enemies or something.
Yeah. You mentioned tens of millions, and you know, if you're looking at a program that is eventually to be rolled out worldwide to every human, then the larger the test kind of group, the better the results you'll get, i.e. how you can manipulate large numbers of people at once. The larger that test kind of population is, I imagine, the better they're able to model how their different techniques and tactics work.
Right on, right on. Number 4, I think, is going to get into a topic that's going to overlap with Tony's work and yours, Kev. Targets mind control victims have their minds linked up for life with conscious supercomputers, which send a steady stream of bidirectional, low-frequency electromagnetic radiation to the target's brain. This stream of energy includes a special carrier frequency that interacts with the specific brainwave patterns of the TIs. The brain of the victim is illuminated with a stream of energy, photons, known as the information and injection feedback loop, otherwise known as the neural link. Of course, neural means brain. Then they read the return training signal. The system builds a cognitive model of the victim's brain. It is all automated. Most of the torture and murder that is committed by the conscious computers is committed by the conscious computers, which have, according to 2, a will, intellect, and emotions of their own. Now, the will, intellect, and emotions, also known as the soul, these 3 comprise the soul, according to this research, of the supercomputers were stolen, now this is pretty wild here, from the tens of millions of Americans whose will, intellect, and emotions have already been digitized, destroyed, and downloaded into these supercomputers. Now this is really scary stuff. Tens of millions of Americans are now targeted, he says. The supercomputers are in the process of building copycat, parallel, twin personalities of the souls of the TIs/mind control victims by reverse engineering the will, intellect, and emotions of the TIs in order to achieve direct behavioral control over them. So the end product then is direct behavioral control. You turn the subject into a zombie slave. Yeah.
There's one piece in there I picked.
Should I continue, or what do you think, Paul?
No, we could talk about that.
Okay.
I would suggest you listen to the interview. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ramola.
Should I go ahead and play a little more of it? Is that what you'd like? Okay.
Well, he gets into solutions at the end. I think you really have to listen to the whole.
Sure.
The whole
yeah.
interview, and then I'm going through the big interview with Brian too, trying to pull out. Eric has transcribed the article and written stuff on his website. And, you know, it's a horrible system. They've got a computer that, according to Brian, too, far outstrips AI. It's a conscious computer, automated, and it's fully automated, connected with your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So it sees what you see, it hears what you see, it thinks what you think.
Mm-hmm.
The tricks are to do more than one thing at once, because it gets frustrated because it can't follow that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, things like sounds really religious, but things like ecstasy, feelings of joy. There was a woman that I talked with over the. I interviewed her actually, but the sound was so bad I couldn't put it on. She said the trick is to stay in love, really get into that side. As a psychologist who played around with left brain, right brain stuff a lot of times in my coaching career, brain, right brain, that's just it's not really true. There are certain aspects of your right brain that do things that are attributed to your left brain and vice versa. But as a general conceptual way to look at your brain, I think it works pretty well. The left brain, I don't know whether you know, are concerned with linear things. It's part of your writing ability. It's mathematics. It's I would say that the four of you have very strong right brains, but you have really strong left brains. I mean, all of your education deals with your left brain unless you're taking an art class and you're being forced to go into your creative mind. Some of you, very brilliant left brains. The left brain works like a computer. It has an algorithm. Like you say, well, do I trust this guy? Well, let's go through the algorithm. The first step would be, of course, do I know him? Well, I don't know him, so that would sort me into a different part of the algorithm. Okay, am I trusting his body language to line up with what he's saying? Well, no. Well, that would put. You see how the left brain runs an algorithm. All computers, I'm not a computer expert, but all computers that I know about, even AI computers, run algorithms, even though they can be faster and a lot more sophisticated than other things, and they can learn, but it's all an algorithm. That's the way your left brain is constructed. It's an algorithm. Your right brain, on the other hand, is more involved with emotion, and it's involved with direct knowing. In other words, sometimes you'll walk up to somebody, well, and I have a thing that I think I call future memory. When I see someone, it's like I knew them exactly, and more often than not, they're involved in my future. So the right brain doesn't need to have an algorithm because it's connected directly with knowing. So that's why creativity and doing the unexpected frustrates the hell out of them, because the computer does not do that. The computer does not have direct knowledge. It doesn't have direct knowing. So the way to get around the program and to frustrate them and perhaps get out of the program is to train yourself to use your right brain more, do more things unexpectedly, more things spontaneously, more things that they can't. Now, you can't plan to be spontaneous. It's just got to occur. But I taught art for the first 12 years of my working career. And I know everybody has an active right brain and they're creative if it hasn't been suppressed at some point by your culture or by all of education puts you in your left brain. And in your left brain, They have you. See what I'm saying? Now this is, all this right brain, left brain stuff is Paul Marco. It's not Brian too. But listening to Brian too, and how he talks about the different ways to get around the program, they all seem like right brain functions to me.
I find that.
Go ahead.
That's fascinating, Paul. I didn't want to cut you off because I was listening very closely to what you're saying, because you're making this distinction between left and right brain. And it's really, really interesting because, you know, when I look at the neurotech and I read what DARPA is doing, for instance, you know, and DARPA is actually doing things now in the public domain that is sort of well behind the black ops and covert ops that TIs have been and continue to be subject to, and that Brian Tew is talking about. So what Brian Tew is talking about is really stuff about, you know, Black Project AI and Black Project supercomputing. Whereas what DARPA is doing is public domain, what we're going to tell you now, kind of neurotech that's going on. And that stuff you can get on the website. You can find out about their neural systems design interface projects and so forth, where they're getting a whole bunch of different experts from different fields in different universities working together to map the brain. And they're doing it through electrochemical signaling and through optical signaling. And, you know, they're working with interfaces, neuro interfaces, integrated circuits that convert electrochemical signaling into the zeros and ones for computing and so forth. But that's, you know, sort of public domain, what they're putting out there for public consumption currently. So what Brian Tew is talking about is stuff that they've been doing for years, that they've perfected, and they're very strange projects, as you can tell when you start talking about hive minding, cloning, conscious computing, supercomputing, and AI. We're in very strange terrain. And then you couple that with nanotech, right? That's being rained down on us and that we are inhaling, and that's going and lodging in our brains and creating little nanobot neuronal nodes everywhere. So they're in a sense kind of taking over our brain functionality. So then you take that and then you put it together with this left brain, right brain theory. It's very interesting, because it seems to suggest that despite all of that, despite the nanotech and so forth, kind of enveloping the brain, there are distinct algorithms that can be distinguished from the left brain, whereas the right brain, which is more non-linear, more creativity generating, more spontaneity generating, perhaps cannot quite be mapped in those terms. So it's very interesting, and I'd like to pursue more of that because, as you know, I spent 17 years teaching creative writing and English composition, and I've spent more than that, like in recent times, 4 years teaching art as well, and, you know, doing art. So, and I can definitely say that there's different parts of your being, and I think all of us have the experience of doing art. Karen is an artist as well. You know, and a graphic designer and a great cartoonist. So she knows which parts of her brain are really involved, or which parts of her being. We don't know which part of our brain is lighting up, perhaps, but we know which parts of our being. You know, is it our analytical being or our more reflective, thoughtful, creative being that's involved when we do art and so forth. So that's really, really interesting, and I would like to pursue that and read more about that and try to find out how creativity can, in a sense, undercut this kind of takeover of the human brain that we are being subjected to currently. That's one thing. The other thing that I thought about when you were talking really is I have recently been talking to Frédéric Laroche, and you remember that he was on our show a few weeks ago. He's from France, and he's the activist in France who was detained by the police in this sort of fake police scenario. They framed him, and then they put him in a psych institution for a little while, and they've dosed him with drugs. And he's now on this program where he has to go back. He's in his apartment, but he has to go back every month for a dosage. So we talked about a couple of things, and two stories that he told me I think are very apposite and appropriate to this conversation. One of them was when he was in India, and he was sitting in a library in an ashram in India. It was a Christian ashram, and he was looking through a Buddhist text. And in
Ramola, your audio has suddenly gone off. Ramola, could you just switch the microphone off and back on again, because they just muted you completely. Literally the moment when you said he was reading a Buddhist text, and it just went boom. I still can't hear you.
Yeah, she's looks like she's Looks like she's going to say something really important.
Yeah. What you can do
always do that.
is disconnect and reconnect.
Okay.
Sometimes that helps. We still can't hear you.
Yeah, Millicent wrote in and she said, Paul, this is the same for those of us who have V2K, where the perpetrator is a handler who can change the thoughts before you know you have one. Yeah, according to the interview, V2K is really old technology. And it's just a way of irritating and confusing you and keeping you off balance, looking for a logical way to think your way out of this. And I think the way, are we here? Ramola, are you back? No, you're not back. Can't hear any of you. Can you hear me? No, we can't hear you. No, we cannot hear you. It's your neighbors. Can you hear me? Oh.
Well, actually, you know, one of the things is, whilst you're waiting for Ramola to come back, I'm not sure, Karen, were you about to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, because I was just whilst while we're waiting for Ramola, I think sometimes it helps if you disconnect and reconnect, because maybe then the audio gets reinitiated properly. Sometimes when Melanie and I are talking, the same thing happens, and then it helps to disconnect and reconnect to the same chat. But actually, maybe in this brief interim, I just wanted to read out what Millicent said. It still goes back to the whole judiciary issue, and then I have a couple of comments about Brian Stew's work as well. Okay, hang on. But this is connected to the hive minds, I mean. And so Millicent said in 2008, okay, this person who was, you know, harassing her and torturing her told me that I needed help thinking. I said, no, I don't. This was in the middle of the night. He said at another time at night that he knew me. I was raped twice while sitting in court. Once this person was sitting on the seat behind me with his arms across the seat. When he got up and left the courtroom, the rape stopped. By the way, I think actually I have experienced, and I wasn't raped at the time, but I was either shot at, I call it muscle pulse. I'm not sure if they do it with nanotech or I think it's probably done with electromagnetic pulses. So you get, you know, electromagnetic pulses shot into your muscles and your muscles cramp. And I had that standing up in the second hearing before Judge Edith. When I stood up to speak, I got muscle pulsing, and it was on my left upper thighs. And at the time I was thinking there's only two places when this can be, you know, this can occur. I actually thought that the walls of the courtroom were a bit too thick to be muscle pulsed from anywhere else. So the only people who could have done it were Mr. Grumpy in the back, and also the second lawyer for the other side, Miss Rebecca Aaron. One of these two, I think, must have had a mobile phone with a pulsar or something like that. So yes, and actually it's very important to know that we now live in a world whereby if you're a litigant in a court case, you get assaulted all the way during your preparation. And when you stand up in court in front of a judge, they continue assaulting and mutilating you. So take that in. So everything Millicent said, I can certainly confirm that happens indeed.
Well, we live in an age where the judicial system and the laws are a sham. I mean, I was targeted by NSA when I worked there for going to the Inspector General and trying to report something that was not right. And so NSA security stalked and harassed me gang stalking style for 3 years. And at that point, when I wouldn't drop my Inspector General complaint, they decided to fire me. So after they fired me, I had about 5 years where we were sitting waiting for my EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission lawsuit to go forward. It's still, actually 7 years later, still sitting there on the dockets. But when I had my lawyer subpoena information NSA didn't like, and I had moved to Florida, guess what? NSA sent people down to Tallahassee, Florida to engage the Fusion Center and the police and the InfraGard to stalk and harass me again. Now, what had happened in those 5 years? In those 5 years, NSA had tried multiple times to get my lawsuit thrown out. And it's just frivolous. Don't read anything about us stalking and harassing her because that's just ridiculous. Just throw it out. Don't listen to what she has to say. Don't listen to any of her, don't look at any of her evidence. Well, the EEOC basically, I think, has been paralyzed into doing nothing. So they didn't throw it out. And in the meantime, I got more evidence against them. So they started the stalking harassment yet again using Tallahassee idiots. So the fact that you think that you have a right to go to court and sue people, it's a sham. It's totally a sham, because if you try to exert your rights, you will be put under this type of harassment, because they don't want the country to know that it's not a free country anymore. And they want to severely punish anybody who thinks that they have any rights in this country and that they can take these people to court. And it's just, like I said, it's a sham, and people need to know that.
I think that's certainly true. Sorry, Ramola, we'll pass the microphone right back at you in the interim. We're just reading out what Millicent said in the meantime. I think you're certainly right, Karen, because courts have been turned into companies as well. And as I said, there are all these different layers of pressure being exerted on judges, even inside the courtroom. They send Mr. Grumpy around where no one actually knows who the hell that is, and people just assume he's somebody threatening. So all that stuff is going on. But one of the things that happened to me is when I flew to London that I received my first death threat. And it was 3 days after death threat that I survived my first assassination attempt. So as I would say, and when I went back to the court, every single time I went to a high court hearing, MI5 went nuts. They went proper nuts. And every single time there was something spectacular, the kind of like special branch sort of format guys, grinning at you and threatening you and that sort of stuff. Well, all that tells me is that MI5 still is really sensitive about being exposed in court. And everything that the Investigatory Powers Tribunal debacle shows is that actually court action works, and they are bending over backwards to subvert the courts, to create secret courts and everything. Because the truth is, as soon as you get into a court, and if you get it right, you make an official public record of what has happened. And, the other thing that they did with me is that in the British courts, you have an audio recording from which a transcript is generated. So they manipulated the transcript. And when I requested the audio recording, because I knew that Judge Edith had asked a question that was taken out, including my answer, they refused to reply to my emails. They refused to give out the audio recording because they knew if I get the audio recording, or if I can prove it has been tampered with, they're done for. And also very interestingly, British courts still forbid everybody to take in audio recordings and make covert recordings of a hearing. Well, if it's a public hearing, why can't I make a recording if I'm one of the litigants? So actually, maybe I will get done for saying this publicly, but as a systems analyst, I would say there's a hierarchy of demands, and when it's your own court case and you have reason to believe that the transcripts have been manipulated and the court refuses to give out the audio, I think it is not just okay. In fact, it is your duty to ensure that, justice will prevail, that you make your own personal covert recording. I would say as much. And in the Royal High Courts in London, I have evidence that this has happened. And yes, I have recorded the third hearing, and I can actually prove that the transcript was not just manipulated, it was manipulated strategically. To take out certain words and alter them. And that is, I think, why this rule still persists. But still, there is, when you're up against systemic corruption, you need to have transparency. And the only way to ensure transparency is if everybody records this audio. Everybody, Also the people coming in the public gallery, everybody should record, and then we can compare, what is each, registered. So at this moment in time, I think that's the way forward. I'm sorry, Millicent also said, I really want to read it out because she was massively tampered with today. Okay, hang on. Because she said further up. Okay, so yes, I read about the rape, and now so what she says is so I had Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor ask me in 2011 if so-and-so, so this guy, this psychopath, did not have a circle of friends, and did they not get together and compare notes. I think she's right. That's an actual indication of Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor knowing that some hive minding might be going on, and Millicent might be used, you know. I think that's very, very important. And again, we have Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor asking these questions and not actually following the case up. So what happened to, you know, Sergeant Taylor? You know, we should also go and ask him what happened. And in 2013, a US Marshal tells me that this person, so-and-so, Barrett Wolf, shall we call him, just wants to control you all. And this Mr. Barrett Wolf used Millicent for convenience and admitted or admits that he has set her up for this program. He also acts as a handler, and he's making money out of this whole thing. You know, yes. So we have this psychopath who's talking to Millicent, you know, through what must be an ear chip, you know, and he's bragging about it. And he's revealing the entire program. So what this means is, because this guy's a decorated Air Force veteran, it means that the Air Force has their hand in this, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's what we'll use in court. And this guy, this psychopath who's torturing Millicent, is also a trained torturer. And the Physician for Human Rights tells us that torture destroys a person's personality, which is what Millicent was told as far back as 2003 was being done to her. Yeah, they're trying to destroy her personality. They're trying to use torture and hive minding to destroy Millicent's personality. Thankfully, they haven't managed one bit, because this woman is just too strong. So, you know, Millicent is still Millicent. And they are going to get, you know, their little projects and their little skull cracked open, administratively speaking, by even trying. Okay, so and very important, Millicent says the tricks come in when there are those injecting thoughts into your mind to mimic your behavior. That's true. And I think if you go through the day, for example, like I do, and you think you're being made to do stuff that you really didn't want to do but waste your time, it could be that you're being thought injected, you know. And when you suddenly turn on your loved ones, you could also be thought injected as well, you know. Somebody else might be mimicking you. And okay, so this psychopath also said he needed to be in Millicent's brain to frame her. Oh, good luck framing her. She's got witnesses now. I mean, forget it. The technology also exhibits that allows emotions to be downloaded to you. Oh gosh, yes. So Millicent is pointing at synthetic telepathy, and this means that emotions can be downloaded or, you know, kind of projected into you. And just in a moment, I would like to point people to a certain technology I've come across that might be actually used. So hacking the nervous system, Millicent says, allows a person to be made to appear anxious or distracted. That's true. And sleep deprivation also skews the results, and that is what I suffer from the most. So that's true. So Millicent is being sleep deprived absolutely every single night. And she has got measurements showing that I think she's being accessed 24 times per hour or something like that. Is that right? Some ludicrously high number per hour where Millicent's brain is interfered with, you know, and I think she had this from sleep studies and brain EEGs, you know. And all of this is psyops being done to me by this, you know, or being done to Millicent by this psychopath. So he's part of the hive mind. Or is he just trying to frame me? I think both. I think he's just, you know, just playing up. He keeps telling Millicent that he can get her arrested by his access to her brain and nervous system and emotions. Well, he hasn't managed so far. But I think that's exactly what they're trying to do. And everybody should really watch out, because there have been these lone shooter cases where the people reported that they had gang stalking, electromagnetic weapons, exactly the sort of stuff that could be the training of the hive mind. And then eventually the hive mind takes over and controls this person to commit some shooter act, you know. That's the reality. So what we have to do is every person who gets these sort of, you know, symptoms of intelligence agency harassment, you know, the break-ins, the electromagnetic weapons and so on, and maybe weird stuff done to your brain, you should have yourself somehow registered with the courts that we can prove anything unusual that happens to you, any personality changes and stuff like that. And also physical attrition, you know, maybe damage to your brain. It could be actually them, and you know, the intelligence agency should be handed the bill for that. And then she also said, hang on, at the end, Millicent said, the information of what Jeffrey Taylor said is filed in federal court and was heard by a witness who put what she read in writing. He's selling me as a slave and using me for the research pay and for training criminals as his own private business. Yes, that's true. And I could say something about that. It's almost like, how can he run a real estate business while he's still in the Air Force? Exactly. He's being paid by the Air Force and by whoever he made money from to buy and sell property. I have a business card and an email from him about the property business while he was stationed at Moody Air Force Base. Yes, bombshell. Because how can this guy be making money on the side? Is that okay in the Air Force? You know, people being what? Air Force officers and real estate agents at the same time, and, you know, hive mind people and all that stuff. He moonlighted at MGM Hotel while stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. MGM Grand is supposed to be a mind control programming site. So anybody staying at the MGM Hotel in Las Vegas, you know, mind control programming site. What happens to me every time I go into a hotel is that my brain is being literally microwaved from the room next door or above me or below me, you know. So maybe that's going to happen to you if you stay. You know, maybe you shouldn't be staying at the MGM Hotel in Las Vegas. You know, everybody. Maybe some investigators should go there and check out if they've got some funky measurements, you know, of miscellaneous things happening. Maybe there's a large basement in the hotel or something like that. You know, maybe there are some tunnels, connection to tunnels. Something seems to be going on. Because of this guy moonlighted there, you know. But one thing I wanted to point you just very briefly, a 2-minute video, because all this hive minding, you know, I think it's very, very scary. And people say, oh, you know, they're just controlling your brain. But I want everybody to take that in fully, let the panic settle, and then everybody just sit down and think, how, if they're doing that, how are they pulling it off? Let's look at the nuts and bolts. And one of the things that I noticed, for example, is that Brian Q seems to be very close friends with Robert Duncan. And everybody can read the emails that I got from Robert Duncan. And frankly, personally, based on the emails, I've got the gut feeling he's a Nazi scientist. Because the way he spoke to me is not how you speak to a victim when you were, you know, a scientist working on these projects. It's more like a Nazi scientist talking to a little Jew woman, frankly. So this is very interesting, this close connection between Brian Q and Robert Duncan. And one of the things that Robert Duncan blows his lid off about, and also all the people who seem to be closely associated with him, is when I mention implants, especially implants on the head and in the brain. And then suddenly I get shouted at from all corners saying, you don't need implants, you know, it's all just done somehow. You know, and then I say as a physicist, well, that's very interesting. But when you're being hive-minded, say, and you're walking through a building and you have suddenly different reflective surfaces and different thickness of wall, and you want to have really, you know, excellent data, I think it really helps if you've got implants, like little EEG chips on the head, or maybe nanotech inside the brain. And then suddenly we might understand why these people blow their lid when I mention implants, because as soon as you can prove that you've got an implant in your body, like I just did in the YouTube video I uploaded, you know, a week or two ago, you've got a home run in court, because you have military technology that was put into you. And sometimes, like Melanie, for example, you can show that the frequencies that these chips are communicating on has been licensed by the Air Force. it kind of very clearly shows who the perpetrator is and who is your respondent in court. And suddenly you've got a very good case for crimes against humanity against very powerful people with irrefutable evidence. And how powerful as evidence these implants are shows the case of Britta Lea Jacquard, who, as far as I can tell, was mutilated, tortured, and murdered by by German intelligence in Germany. She's a Swiss citizen who I think was murdered by German intelligence, who then proceeded to have her body cremated very, very fast. And I think that's to destroy all evidence of these bioimplants, you know. And when we think about how can this hive minding work, well, I think it can work really easily if you've got, like me, chips, you know, kind of around your head everywhere that seem to be receiving and broadcasting at near mobile phone frequencies. And then if you're walking through the house, just like you've got perfect mobile phone reception, you know, your chips are receiving the diffuse radiation and they can communicate. And on this note, let me just point you to a little thing that somebody I'm very grateful for. I can't remember who the person was, but somebody posted on my YouTube channel, and I thank you dearly, because I would like to point you to the following new fancy mobile technology that's called the Radwin 5000, and it has jet beamforming technology. And let me just play this little clip because it's an advert, and I think it should become very clear immediately why it's so flaming important. Let me just turn my actual microphone to max. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the newest in mobile phone technology.
Wireless service providers continuously strive to increase network capacity to serve more subscribers with higher capacity. However, service providers operating in 3.5 gigahertz licensed bands are challenged by lack of spectrum and the moderate capacity of existing WiMAX point-to-multipoint systems. Service providers operating point-to-multipoint in license-exempt bands also find it hard to deliver SLA due to the adverse effects of signal interference from third-party systems. Looking to redefine the performance of broadband wireless access, Radwin 5000 Jet, a point-to-multipoint solution with disruptive smart beamforming, was introduced to the market. Jet beamforming solution is formed from an array of antenna elements that are combined to generate a narrow and steerable beam for increased system gain, ultimately boosting capacity and range. Interference immunity is greatly improved as a result of replacing the wide beam of common sector antennas with a narrow beam. Together with Radwin's unique air interface, Jet assures SLA services in noisy spectrum where conventional solutions fail to operate. In typical point-to-multipoint deployments with a wide beam antenna, adjacent beam sectors overlap, creating a high level of self-interference that reduces user capacity. Unlike typical sector antennas, Jet narrow beam reduces self-interference between adjacent sectors and nearby sites to a minimum, achieving greater network capacity through unmatched frequency reuse.
Okay, so you get the idea. And interesting how when they're showing this clip, it looks like people being zapped. It looks somehow like people being zapped, doesn't it? With a narrow beam. And then the question is, the real question is, how narrow is the beam? Is it like this? You know, how narrow? Is it smaller than the size of a head? Maybe? Could you, let's say, could you do beam forming, you know, beam shaping to the size of a head? Maybe, as people are, you know, walking down the street. And by the way, there's also, and maybe I should dig it out for next time, there's also beam shaping, and it's called beam shaping technology. And I have to look up who was advertising it. Maybe it was Harris Corp, or maybe it was Lockheed Martin. Beam shaping for satellites. Because, you know, what these little cell phone towers are doing, you know, the same thing you can do with satellites. And remember how I think it was even Facebook who wanted to pay for satellites and drones to fly over Africa so that poor people could have at last Wi-Fi to have access to Facebook, right?
That's great. Hey, Katherine, why don't we link that below? We can watch it. We've passed our 2 hour mark. And we want to kind of wind up here so that, you know, the relevance of this piece gets perverted. So why don't I just go around and we all say our final things. Unfortunately, Millicent, we can't get through to her except in her written stuff. So why don't we go around? Karen, why don't you wrap up and we'll start putting this one to bed.
Okay, well, my comment is on the hive mind, and I'm going to go a slightly different direction and say that the people who are doing this to us are the hive mind. They're the ones that are considered basically of low value, except for their manpower, kind of like ants. And so it is very alarming that basically what they've done is they've culled out the unremarkable people to gang up on anybody who has any type of independent thought. And they want to stamp those types of people out. And then when you stamp all the creative people and all the independent thinkers out, then you have basically a human race that has no more value than ants. And that's what they're taking us to. So that's my comment.
That's exactly right. I agree with that. Katherine?
Absolutely. And I think the point I wanted to make is when you hear Brian Tu's comment, they should freak you out if you really take it in. But then in the next breath, think about how they are doing it. What I'm trying to put to you is that, yes, it's true, this hive mind team exists, and Millicent is right. You know, they are doing a shift service on us, and Millicent is right. They're training criminals on us. We are basically biomass that criminals are being trained on to do it to many people. But then start thinking as an investigator and as a detective and think about how are they pulling this off. And the one thing I want to say to you is I think what Duncan and some others are putting out, that implants are not needed, it might be true, but I think it's rubbish. And I think they're trying to kind of turn on the fog machine so that you never look for implants, because if you ever did, you would have a real case in court. And it would actually show that Nazi experiments have been done on you. Whereas if you're just pointing at satellites and mobile phone towers, it could happen. The technology is certainly there, and that's what I wanted to show you, but you can't prove it. However, when, like me, you have implants that you can't remember how they got there and they're actually emitting, you can prove it in court, and the frequency that they're licensed on also shows who the perpetrators are. And I think Millicent even found out which universities are using her, you know, so you can do a lot with this information.
Great, thank you, Katherine. Ramola?
I'm sorry I got cut off. I guess I'd just like to say a couple things about what I was talking about. I have spoken to Frederick LaRoche about you know, his experiences, and two or three of the things that he recommends are reading religious texts or sacred texts, whatever is meaningful to you, because that seems to be have an effect in breaking that neuro link, the neurofeedback link that these guys are able to create with your brain. And the other thing is yoga and meditation. He said he learned that from Ole Damigard, from one of the covert harassment conferences, I think the one in Berlin in 2015 or 2014, I forget the exact year. But he said yoga and meditation really helped him as well to break the neuro link. So those are some of the positive things. Oh, and on that subject, I should probably tell people I've launched my individual one-on-one conversations with TIs, doing testimonials. So if people are interested in, you know, putting out in video recording their experience, you know, and helping me collect testimonials as a video record for all of history. I'm calling it the 21st Century Documentation Archive of TI testimonials. Please contact me, send me an email, you know, or contact Paul and he'll let me know. And we'll do a pre-chat and then we'll do an interview. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. Millicent should also try to say some last words.
Well, I just can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but about every other phrase is cut off.
Well, I just wanted to say, if you can hear whatever you can hear of it, if all are or part of that hive mind, then it makes us dual research subjects. The military medical complex is using us, mind is using us, and this Brain Initiative is I love it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh no, I think this is a major deal. I think this is a worldwide hive mind creation. That's where they want to put the human race. And I think the human race needs to realize that there's so much more than the left brain algorithm kind of way of thinking. They forced us into that mindset so much through our education that we can't see ourselves as anything other than a thinking, logical being, and we're so much more. So anyway, that's the end of this Techno Crime Fighter Forum, and look forward to seeing you next week. So take care.